Your customers have it all figured out, and you have it all figured out. You know what your customers want, you know how to deliver it to them, everything's going along smoothly, and then bam! What do you do? Hello, my friends. This is Mace Haroff. I want to welcome you to the Medical Sales Guru Podcast, the podcast for medical sales professionals, and this is also simulcast on YouTube at the Medical Sales Channel. Thank you for being here. This has been a crazy couple of weeks. If you are a regular follower of the Medical Sales Guru podcast, you know I put it out roughly every week, but there's been a gap of a few weeks since I've recorded a podcast. So I want to welcome you back. Hopefully you're back to be here. You might be wondering what happened. Well, what happened is very simply Hurricane Irma is what happened in my world. I live in South Florida, and we had to deal with, first of all, the approach of Hurricane Irma. And I don't know about you, but I've lived in Florida for 40-something years, and when someone tells me, and that's someone being the NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and other reliable weather entities, when they tell me that there is a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 185 miles an hour approaching where I live, see ya. I'm gone. I'm not hanging out. This was a catastrophic storm for the areas that it hit, mainly in the Keys. Naples, southwestern Florida took a direct hit. Not very good for the people over there. And I just needed to avoid it, and I buttoned up my house. My wife and I, we evacuated, got out of Dodge, and went someplace where we knew we would be safe. And working that in with some client work and speeches and presentations, it took me down where I couldn't do a podcast for the last couple of weeks. So I apologize for that, but I'm back. And thinking about Hurricane Irma, or more importantly, dealing with catastrophes, has me thinking about some very important information that I want to share with you. Because while those of us in South Florida and recently in the Houston area of Texas, while those people had to deal with Harvey, which was a horrendous storm with horrendous flooding, it disrupts people's lives. But not only does it disrupt people's lives, it disrupts businesses, government, everything. So here's what I want to talk to you about today. You see, when there's a catastrophe or a disaster, healthcare, what you're involved with, healthcare doesn't stop. There is still a need for healthcare. And as a result, there is still a need for the goods and services that keep healthcare going. This is what you provide. So what I'm going to talk about today, let me be very, very blunt with you. Most of you are going to listen to what I say and you're going to think, oh, that's a good idea. And then you're going to do nothing. In fact, many of you, hopefully not you, but the other people who are listening to this, many of you listen to what I say and you think, oh, that's good stuff. That would work. I need to implement that in my sales efforts. You intend to do it, but you don't do it. Well, a lot of you are going to do the same with what I'm talking about today. And here's the good news. Because most of you won't do this, for those of you that do, it could have a tremendous impact on your business. So pay attention. Whether you use it or you don't use it, it's up to you. But I'm telling you, this can make a big difference in your business. Disasters, catastrophes. There's so many out there. We're talking about hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, blizzards, winter's coming, which, blizzards, ice storms, power outages, you name it. There are a whole host of potential disasters. Terrorist events. We don't like to think about it, but it's a possibility. It's the world we live in. So here's the thing. Most healthcare sales professionals never think about these things until they happen. And I get it. I'm no different. I've been there on the selling end. I try not to think about it until it happens now. But having been through these events many times, I think about it a lot more often. And certainly when I hear that a disaster is imminent or a potential disaster is approaching, I have a disaster plan. What is your disaster plan? And more importantly, this disaster plan isn't so much for you. It is, but it's really for your customers. Because here's the thing. Your customers, what they are really looking for from a supplier such as you is someone who could keep them going when they need it most, when no one else can provide them and their patients with what they need. You see, you have to have a plan. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But did you ever think about visiting your customers, and instead of just talking about product, you should talk about product. Certainly you should talk about their problems, their challenges, the things that they want to talk about. That is key. And most sales reps talk about their products or services that they deliver. But in this world where disasters and catastrophes and disruptions to the medical practice are a possibility, did you ever think about having a conversation with your customers about it? This is a worthwhile conversation to have, especially in those areas that are subject to these type of events more frequently. For example, Florida, it's a given. We have hurricanes here in Florida. If you're in the Midwest, tornadoes are a possibility. In fact, tornadoes are a possibility in many different parts of the country: the Southeast, Texas, Oklahoma, the Midwest. Earthquakes, very common if you're out in California, San Francisco, Los Angeles. In fact, earthquakes are a possibility absolutely almost anywhere. I believe earthquakes have occurred in something like 48 of the 50 states at some time in history. But you know where the most most earthquake-prone areas are. So what happens during these events, especially as it relates to you and your business and your customers? Well, what happens is people get injured. For example, we know that with recently Hurricane Harvey, a lot of people were injured in the floodwaters. People slip and fall. They have accidents. There are accidents when power comes back on, where people get electrocuted. There are fires. There's burns. There are animal incidents, insects. You may have seen in Texas, where there were just mounds of fire ants that were just floating on the water. And if they encounter any people, they're going to crawl all over the people and bite them. This has happened. The bottom line is people are more likely to need health care when there is a disaster than when there's not a disaster. And as a consequence of that, your customers, in other words, your accounts, your physicians, nurses, the therapists you work with, the healthcare institutions such as hospitals and clinics, they could find themselves low on supplies, or they may need specific equipment from you and supplies from you that they might not have on the shelf. So there needs to be a way, number one, of them to notify you, communication. Do you have a disaster communication plan? And secondly, there needs to be a way where you can get these goods and services to your customers. So this is worth having a conversation with your customers about. So right now, think about what you sell. And again, I'm serious about this. Don't just listen and go, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. I'll think about what I sell and then not do it. Think about what you sell that your customers might need in a disaster. In other words, if you sell orthopedic trauma, for example, in a disaster, people are on ladders. Even before the disaster occurs, I can tell you that right before Hurricane Irma, I was on a very high ladder because I couldn't find anyone to put up my shutters. No one was available. I hired someone to put it up last year for Matthew. This year I had to do it on my own. So I was up on a 25-foot ladder. Fortunately, I didn't fall, but a lot of people fall. They fall off a roof. So when they're handling hurricane shutters, they drop the shutter and they catch it, and it slices their hand or their arm or their leg or their feet if it falls on their feet. Those things are sharp. So what type of products do you sell? What type of patient or what type of injury would necessitate the need of your products. And think about that. So I mentioned orthopedic trauma. If you sell orthopedic trauma where people are falling off of ladders, they may need plates or screws or external fixation devices or bone graft for people who have fractures as a result of this. And if you know that hospitals are going to be treating a higher level of these types of cases during these events, then they may need more of your supplies. They may need more small bone equipment or large bone equipment or whatever it is. Think about what your customers might need in a disaster. It doesn't matter what you sell. Just think about what your customers might need. What are they likely to run out of? What type of additional services can you provide? Like a lot of you, if you sell surgical products, you provide technical expertise during these cases. Are you able to get to the hospital to provide this type of expertise, or to the clinic to be able to help your customers when they need you? What about actually getting to your customers? If there's a flood, if transportation is not available, if the roads are blocked by a tree or something like that, what would you do to be able to get your supplies and equipment to where they will be used? This is very, very important to think about. Let me ask you this. You know your equipment. You know how your customers use your products, your services. In a disaster, what might your customers not be thinking about that you could help them with? You understand what they do. For example, let's say that they're doing business right now with a competitor of yours. And you know that the competitor's warehouse or office is 5 hours away on the other side of the state. And if they need something, their chances of getting it are pretty unlikely. But yet you could tell the customer that, look, I live 15 minutes away from the hospital. I keep a supply of this in my car, in my house, in the warehouse that's nearby. I'll get it to you. It might not be as easy, but whereas your current supplier is going to have to get it across 200 miles of countryside, I only have to get it 5 miles. And if I have to walk through the floodwater to get it to you, I will do that. So I'm not. And listen, here's the thing. They may not want to shift their business over just because you're saying that, but should that catastrophe, that disaster, that opportunity arise, you may find yourself in a really wonderful situation. I'm going to say this and I'll repeat it again. A catastrophe or a disaster is a crisis. Crisis is the word. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We don't wish for it, and we certainly don't wish it on anyone, but it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate to your customers that you are committed to them, you are committed to their patients, and you are putting your money where your mouth is. You actually have a disaster plan. So what can you help your customers to become aware of? How can you become a plan B if what they're currently doing doesn't work out, if they run out of something, or they find themselves in situations where perhaps the competitive product they're using is not the best choice for them. Now, you might want to maybe talk to your distributor, talk to your company about actually posting this disaster plan on the company website or on the distributor's website. And you might want to have a brochure or a pamphlet or a handout that you could leave with your customers, maybe a sticker, in the event of an emergency to contact us, here's how you do it. Maybe a text, an email, an alternative phone number. Maybe you're on WhatsApp or one of the other apps that are more likely to be available provided you have Wi-Fi access if cell towers are down. Have a disaster plan and share it with your customers. And you have to know this as well. I mean, when I'm talking about this, if you've ever been through a hurricane, the cell phone towers have enough power to go on for a while. But after that, the batteries that are keeping them running or the generators that are keeping them running have to be refueled. There could be downtime. So it might not be as simple as saying, just call my cell phone. Are you picking up your cell phone, which just rang a moment ago because I didn't silence it before doing the podcast. Shame on me. It's not as easy as just picking it up and having the customer call you or you calling them. What is your communication plan? What's the communication plan that you have with your distributor, with your company, with whoever your suppliers are, with whoever your delivery people are? Do you have these type of things in place? Do the things and talk about the things that your competitors won't talk about. Remember I said most of you who are listening, you're going to hear this and that'll be the end of it. Most of your competitors will not do what I'm talking about. They won't do it because it requires some work, requires some thought, requires some planning to take and make the time to do this. But for those of you who do, if you're going to talk with your customers about the things your competitors won't talk about, it's going to say something about you. I promise you, if you live in Florida or the Houston area of Texas, this is on your customers' minds right now because they have just experienced it. And here in Florida, throughout the hurricane season, they will continue to experience it. There's another hurricane out in the Atlantic right now. Hopefully it's not coming here. I don't think it will, but it's going to go somewhere. Somewhere, someone is going to need a disaster plan, a crisis plan. It might be you, wherever you are. So start having these conversations with your customers. Put these plans together. It doesn't take a whole lot of time or thought. Maybe at your next sales meeting, take a half hour and outline a disaster plan so that when it happens, you get to stand out. You get to have this differentiating light shined on you that you were there for your customers because you were prepared when nobody else was. That makes a huge, huge difference. Again, I'm going to repeat this. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. But if you wait until the crisis, you're not going to be prepared to help your customers help their patients. And in case you've forgotten, this is what you do for a living. I'll be back the next few weeks with more, hopefully next week and the week after that, with more information. I'll be talking more about sales and actual customer interactions. But here I'm talking about a customer interaction that you could use for differentiating yourself from the competitors who only come in there and talk about products. So take advantage of this idea. And while we're chatting, I also want to offer you a free course about how to create and sell irresistible value in medical sales. Now, many of you have already been through this program, and those of you who have, I've received incredible feedback about how it's had an immediate impact on your business, the way your customers respond, your sales outcomes. Makes a huge difference. If you would like to have access to this free course, all you have to do is send a text, like this, send a text and follow the directions. Just text the word delivery, that's DELIVERY, text the word delivery to the number 44222. 44222. Text delivery to 44222. You'll get a text back asking for your email, enter it, and you'll receive access, it's easy for you to say, to the first video shortly thereafter. So text delivery to 44222 and start learning how to differentiate yourself with your customers almost immediately. I appreciate you being here because by you watching this video, listening to this podcast, it says that you want to be the best you can be so you could sell more. Sure, I get that. Listen, you didn't get into sales because it's a fun, easy job. But it's a very rewarding job. And it's rewarding that you can make a huge difference for your customers and their patients. And the bigger the difference you make and the more people you make a difference for, the more you're going to earn. That's why you're here. That's what you want to do. So thank you for doing that. And whatever you do in your medical sales career, please don't forget that nothing and no one is more important than who? The patient. The patient, my friends, always comes first. Go out there and make a difference. I will talk to you again soon. This is Mace Hara for the Medical Sales Channel and the Medical Sales Guru podcast. Bye for now.